Ross Glendinning was one of the most complete players of his era. Like Peter Knights at Hawthorn and Terry Danaher at Essendon, he was equally adept forward or back. He was a star in defence for North Melbourne and good enough to kick 70 goals in a season at full forward for West Coast late in his career. Welcome, Ross. If you were coaching your own team, where would you play?
Good question, Mike. I really enjoyed playing centre-half forward, having played probably mostly back as a junior, but playing forward, you could be more creative and perhaps have a bit more of an impact on the game. So releasing the shackles a bit, using your intuitive skills, if you like, a bit of nous to find the footy. But if you played in the key positions, full-back or centre-half back, you more than often played on a really good player, so you learnt a lot. So that probably helped a little when I did go forward.
Gary Lyon always says it's much harder to play forward than back. Do you subscribe to that?
I probably do agree with that. I think if you're being led to the footy a bit as a backman, you learn to play the game a bit more. You've still got to have a lot of concentration and be defensively minded. But when you go forward, you can be creative. And if you like a Wayne Carey, not comparing myself there at all, but he controlled a game, won a game, had the game played through him. And they're very hard to find. There's not a lot of key centre-half forwards in today's game, Mike, is there?
Let's go back to the late 70s. You ended up playing at North Melbourne.
North were really impressive when you had Alan Aylett, David Robb and Ron Joseph come to Perth on a couple of occasions and speak to Mum and Dad and me. And the way they spoke, there was no expectation. They just painted the picture of the club being a very family-oriented club. They'd had good experience in bringing expats to the club previously with a Rich McKelchick and Graham Melrose, Barry Cable. So there's a bit of a history there. And I think that's probably what won it. And then we also went across for the 77 grand final, or 75 grand final, I should say.
So North were into you in 1975, were they?
Yeah, they invited Mum, Dad and I across as a guest of the club to watch that final. And of course, North won, and their first win in history. So, and the way that we were looked after and were brought into the group, the family, if you like, was pretty impressive. So I remember on our flight home, we'd been to the Sunday celebrations, and being a part of that in itself was pretty enthralling. And I met the likes of Brent Croswell and Sam Kekovich, who you would well know were wonderful characters.
You haven't forgotten either of those.
I haven't. But I remember in the car going home, Dad just said, how impressive was that? And Mum, she was hard to please because she was supposedly going to lose her boy, but she said, no, they were pretty impressive. So it wasn't difficult to say yes.
So, Roscoe, you watched North Melbourne win in 75 and you were forced to watch them win again in 77?
Yeah. 75 was clearly, I was a guest and I was only 19.
77, you'd already committed to North, had you not?
I had, and I'd moved across in November 76 with a view to starting playing with the club in 77. But East Perth, my club here, said that I hadn't played enough games or given them enough service, so they stood in the way, which I can understand, but I was a bit annoyed with because I thought, well, I'm here, why can't you release me? So they stood really firm.
They, including your father?
Yes.
Was on the committee?
Yeah, well, he just said, look, we need to honour both, and whilst he wasn't happy either, the fact is that East Perth agreed with North that if I came back and played the second half of the 77 season with East Perth, they would then release me for 78. Okay. So, and I thought that was really fair and reasonable. And Mike, the thing being too is that I spent that 7 or 8 months in Melbourne with North, settling into the lifestyle, getting a job, training, doing everything but playing. So when I did get released and came back for 78, I just felt really comfortable.
And you never got to play in the flag?
No, I got to be close.
And 78, you played?
Yeah, we played in a grand final against Hawthorn. So you get that experience, Mike, and it's not cliched at all, but you do hear a lot and you know a lot of players, whether it be VFL, AFL, other sports, who play in a team sport, who don't get a chance to play in a final or a grand final. Well, I had that, so pretty disappointing, but it's not something I carry with me.
No, I believe that.
I mean, I generally don't. Yeah. I mean, it would be wonderful to say you're a premiership player, but I've played in a grand final. Yep. Some coaches, I will say, well, mate, what are you talking about? But that's me, and I accept that.
What about the first, I don't know what stage of the game it was, but it was very early in the 78 grand final.
First bounce, Mike.
First bounce, so Hawthorn kick it forward.
Yeah, Moncrief, mate. Well, there's 105,000 people. Beautiful sunny day in Melbourne.
Yeah.
Coloured toweling hats were all the go. So 99,000 are wearing coloured toweling hats. You've probably still got yours. They bounce the ball. I'm playing on Mike Moncrief. It comes quickly out of the centre, bang, on his chest, shot at goal.
So your man's kicked a goal before the first minute of the grand finals elapsed.
So you think, is there a shovel nearby? And you're thinking, how deep can I go? And you think, God, there's stuff running around. And Lee Matthews, with that high-pitched voice saying, which was all part of the competitive nature.
What was Lethal say?
Well, I can't repeat it, Mike, but it was pretty full.
Lee Matthews?
Yeah, you wouldn't believe that, would
you?
you?
An icon of the game like Lee.
No, look, it makes you realise how competitive the game is, and certainly the high stakes that were on the day.
How was Blighty in '82 when you kicked 103 goals and you won the BNF?
Didn't say much. No.
He'd lead the room.
No, he did lead the room. Oh, he'd had a cracking year, and given the circumstances that had happened when he'd been the coach previously and had to then become the player, that was a remarkable effort. And he's the best player I've played with at North Melbourne, without doubt. His ability to play both ends, through the middle particularly, for a bloke who did limited training, he just had a wonderful footy brain. So,
how did he cope with the disappointment about the coaching role?
I reckon he moved on really well. I mean, Blighty's a fairly in-depth sort of soul. I didn't know him that well at the time. I mean, we were not mates, but he was a little older. And he tended to be a little, not by himself, but he tended to be a little bit separated from the group at times. I thought outwardly he handled it pretty well. I mean, it's not an easy thing to take that on and be the last, he didn't know that, the last of the playing coaches. It's a pretty tough gig, mate. And you're playing on ball, full forward, and you're sort of coaching players who you've played a fair bit, like a David Dench and a Wayne Schimmelbusch and a Keith Gregg and that ilk of player, a Gary Dempsey. So that to change to be their coach, their mentor, it's rare.
Lots of the great players, Ross, who could play centre-half forward, centre-half back.
Yep.
On a windy day, they'd stay at the same end. They were that good. Did that ever happen to you?
Very good question, Mike. It happened to me once playing for North at Arden Street against Essendon, and the breeze was blowing a gale from the gasometer from the pool end, from the Errol Street end, straight down the ground. So a bit of a wet, daggy day, and I just stayed either in a forward pocket or in a back pocket. And,
did you really?
Yeah, and it worked out okay. I think I may have kicked 4 or 5, and I'm not.
You know.
No, I think 5.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
but
it was intriguing.
And then you stopped the other mob kicking any goals when you're in the back.
Took a couple of catches, and I think I probably gave it back to them. But
it was good fun. Who was your coach that day?
That would have been Barassi. So, which was, look, it was really, it was strange, but you think, could that have happened more?
Let's go to September '83. North's eliminated. You had a bad final series. Not you. I'm talking about the collective here. Bad final series. 2 big thrashings.
Yes.
You eliminated in the preliminary final. You go to Mad Monday, which also happened to be the day of the Brownlow medal. Did you lose your direction a bit that day?
Well, it so happened, we didn't play well at all, and we had a very good year. So Mad Monday wasn't anything out of the ordinary, but I did get a phone call at the hotel we were at, which was the Homebush in North Melbourne. My wife Kerry had rung, no mobile phones, of course, in those days. Saying,
so she rang the pub.
She found out where we were. We weren't hiding, and she said, finally got through, and I was called to the bar. She said, "You have any idea that we're supposed to be at the Brownlow tonight?" So I quickly gathered myself and took off, got home, got changed, and got to the event on time.
Clearly you were in contention, weren't you?
Yeah, I think there was probably 4 or 5. It was probably 3 or 4 that had featured in most of the media awards and was spoken about. Terry Wallace was certainly one. Morris Rioli, Simon Madden.
Now, Morris ran second and Simon was third.
Correct.
It's a good trifecta.
Yeah, and that's what makes it even more fulfilling for me individually to think, well, you've actually just filled out in front by a vote of some pretty cracking players.
Yeah.
So we didn't have a drink during the night, but as Mr. E.J. Whitten always did in those days, post the award ceremonies, there was a room in the Southern Cross that you went to, and he was the chef de mission.
I want to recite your coaches, Roscoe. Barassi, Blight, Cable and Kennedy.
Yes.
Massive names there.
Yeah.
And all different personalities. And then here you had Ron Alexander and John Todd. All bring different things to the table.
Very much so. Yeah.
Who was the one who had the most influence on you?
Oh, clearly Barassi in my first years at North. I mean, he's physically and mentally, he's a very intimidating fellow in how he coached. I had him in probably the second half of his tenure at North, and I just thought that sort of coaching style was starting to just wane a little.
Describe the style to me.
Oh, it's like a fire and brimstone. That quintessential old style of yell and scream and not abuse, but could pick on you very, very harshly in a personal sense. Not unhappy to separate you, and quite often, the more ability or better player you were, the more he'd have a crack.
That was his
way. That's his mantra.
Well, the two most famous coaches, I suspect, in the last 50 years, Barassi and John Kennedy. You had both of them, and they were different. John Kennedy was more paternalistic, was he?
Very much so. Very much the orator. No question, we got the message of how the persona of John Kennedy and the legend of John Kennedy walked into North Melbourne Football Club change rooms. There was 55 odd players in the change room, not a very big area, a cacophony of noise like you wouldn't believe. John walks in with John Dugdale and Ron Joseph through the side door, turns and faces the crowd. Almost immediately, there's silence. He just had that ability, has that ability, doesn't he?
That presence, that aura.
It's just a presence. Yeah. And then when he speaks, there's not a multitude of words, but they're very select and very succinct.
Did you get close to him, do you think?
He wasn't a coach that you could approach, but you want to have something of substance to approach him with. Don't come to me with fluff and rubbish. Have something specific. If you want some help, certainly. If you're not, that's fine. His pre-match addresses were simple. Our training was simple. Circle work one way, then go the other way. Someone's got confused.
John, can we do something different?
I mean, and look, I say this so respectfully, but he would stand in the middle of Arden Street on a cold, shocking Tuesday night. This turf wickets are still in the middle, and he's got a sleeveless jumper on, a pair of footy shorts, odd-coloured socks, and a pair of hush puppies. And you think
John Kennedy and hush puppies.
Well, he was like a praying mantis with varicose veins.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just, but that's him.
Yeah.
And he just had a presence. When he spoke, he'd bellow from the middle of the ground, and everyone would stop.
And no major emphasis on strategy.
Not particularly. It was effort, playing for the club, team, and if the ball's there, you get it.